welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a really pivotal moment in American history, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, June 1876.
That's right. Often called Custer's Last Stand, but there's so much more to it than just that one image.
Absolutely. It's this incredible and tragic intersection of things, broken promises, military decisions, and this really powerful moment of Native resistance.
Exactly. And we've got a lot to draw on here. Military accounts, reports, and really crucial Native oral histories, too. Our goal is to kind of piece together the why behind it all, the causes, the decisions made, and, the legacy it left, which is still debated today.
And right off the bat, you see these key figures. George Armstrong, Custer, flashy, maybe reckless, definitely seeking glory.
Yeah, and then you have Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, leaders focused on defending their people's way of life, their land. It's a stark contrast.
It really is. So how did these two sides end up facing each other on the Little Bighorn River that summer? What really kicked this whole thing off?
Well, you have to rewind a bit. The root cause really goes back 8 years earlier to 1868, the Treaty of Fort Laramie.
Okay, the Fort Laramie Treaty, that was supposed to settle things, right?
It was meant to be definitive. It set up the Great Sioux Reservation, and crucially, it promised the Black Hills Pahasapa, sacred land to the Sioux. And the wording was clear. Forever.
Forever. That word carries a lot of weight. But forever didn't last very long, did it?
No, it didn't. The government, saw treaties more as flexible arrangements, especially when resources were involved.
And resources were involved.
Yeah.
Gold, right?
Exactly. The fuse was lit in 1874. Custer himself, ironically, leads an expedition into the Black Hills. Confirms the rumors there's gold there.
Ah, and once gold is confirmed.
Well, that changes everything. The idea of native ownership just evaporated. The pressure became immense almost overnight. Prospectors started flooding into the Black Hills, completely ignoring the treaty.
And the government's response?
They quickly demanded the Sioux either sell the land or just leave. That forever promise, pretty much gone.
So, sell your sacred land or get out. And when leaders like Sitting Bull refused,
Their refusal was painted as hostile, as an act of war, essentially.
so the refusal became the justification for military action.
That's it. The War Department issued an ultimatum that winter. All Sioux who weren't on the designated reservation lands had to return by January 31st, 1876.
Which was basically impossible given the weather and the distances involved.
Completely unrealistic. And the Army knew it. So when the deadline passed, anyone still outside the reservation was officially declared hostile.
And that gave the Army the green light.
It gave them the official pretext for the big military campaign that spring, which led directly to the Little Bighorn. It was fundamentally about enforcing the seizure of land that had been guaranteed by treaty.
Okay, so that sets the stage. A massive native gathering, determined to resist, and the U.S. Army marching in. Let's talk about Custer himself, the boy general from the Civil War. What was his mindset heading into this?
Custer was complex, definitely riding on his Civil War fame. He was young, charismatic in his own way, known for the long golden hair, the buckskins, very image conscious.
Bit of a showman.
A lot of a showman, and crucially, he was kind of in hot water at the time. He'd testified against some people high up in Washington, ruffled feathers. He arguably needed a big, flashy victory to sort of restore his image and, maybe boost his career, perhaps even political ambitions down the line.
So personal ambition was a major factor, possibly clouding his judgment.
It seems very likely. He had this reputation for boldness, sometimes recklessness, and he certainly wasn't known for patience. Waiting wasn't really his style if he saw a chance for glory.
And what about the force he was heading towards? You hear it called the Village of Nations. What does that mean?
It means it was huge, possibly one of the largest gatherings of Plains peoples ever recorded. Thousands of tipis stretched along the river. We're talking Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, Arapaho, maybe 1,500, maybe even 2,000 warriors.
Wow. So a massive unified force.
Unified in purpose, absolutely. They were there to defend their way of life. And the sheer size of it was something Custer's intelligence failed to grasp, or perhaps he chose to ignore it.
And within that village, you had powerful leadership. Sitting Bull. What was his role?
Sitting Bull was hugely important, not primarily a war chief in the tactical sense, but a spiritual leader, a holy man. His influence was immense.
And didn't he have some kind of vision before the battle?
He did, a very powerful one. Just before the fight, he performed the sun dance, a really arduous spiritual ritual. And during it, he had a vision. He saw soldiers falling into their camp upside down like grasshoppers from the sky.
Wow, that must have had a huge impact on morale.
Absolutely. It spread through the camp. It wasn't just a dream. It was seen as prophecy, a sign that they would be victorious. It gave them immense confidence, immense resolve. They believed destiny was on their side.
So you have spiritual certainty, and then you also have skilled military leaders like Crazy Horse and Gall.
Definitely. If Sitting Bull provided the why, figures like Crazy Horse provided the how. Crazy Horse was renowned, a brilliant tactician, known for his bravery, his ability to lead charges, to flank enemies. Gall, too, a key Hunkpapa Lakota leader, was instrumental in organizing the defense and counterattacks. This wasn't just a mob. It was a well-led, highly motivated force.
Okay, so June 25th dawns. Custer's scouts spot the village. They must have realized how big it was then.
They did. They reported back about the scale, a huge village. But Custer, he seems to have misinterpreted the situation.
How so?
He was advised to wait. General Terry and the main column weren't far off, maybe a day. But Custer apparently feared the village would break up and scatter if he delayed.
So he thought they were running, not preparing to fight.
That seems to be the prevailing theory based on his actions. He thought quick action was needed to trap them, to prevent their escape. He didn't want to lose his chance for that decisive victory.
Driven by that need for glory again, overriding caution.
It looks that way, and this is where he makes that critical, tactical decision, the one that gets talked about constantly.
Dividing his regiment.
Exactly. The cardinal sin of divide and conquer, only he was the one dividing his own force in the face of a potentially superior enemy. He splits the 7th Cavalry, his whole command, into 3 battalions.
Okay, break that down for us. Who went where?
Right. He gives Major Marcus Reno about 175 men, sends them charging towards the southern end of the village first. That was meant to be the main initial assault.
Okay, Reno goes in first. What about the others?
Then he sends Captain Frederick Benteen with about 125 men off on this wide, sweeping move to the south and west, sort of scouting, but also explicitly looking to cut off any escape route.
So Benteen's group is quite far removed from the main action initially, based on the idea that the natives were fleeing.
Precisely. A significant chunk of his fighting force sent off on a mission based on a faulty premise. It left Custer himself with the remaining men, about 210 troopers.
And his plan was
to swing around and attack the village from the north or east, likely trying to hit the center or flank while Reno engaged them from the south. A classic pincer move if it had worked against a smaller panicked force.
But it wasn't a smaller panicked force.
Not at all. And that miscalculation unraveled almost immediately.
So Reno makes the first move, charges the southern end. What happened?
It was a disaster for Reno almost from the start. Instead of catching them off guard, he slams into a huge concentration of warriors, ready and waiting.
Yeah.
Gall was prominent here, leading the defense.
They weren't running. They were defending their homes, their families.
Exactly. The resistance was fierce, immediate, and overwhelming. Reno's troopers were vastly outnumbered in that part of the fight. They were quite flanked, taking heavy casualties.
Panic.
Yes. The accounts describe chaos. Reno seems to have lost control. The charge faltered, turned into a desperate retreat back across the river.
And men were killed trying to cross the water.
Yes, caught in the open. It was brutal. Reno and the survivors scrambled up onto the bluffs on the other side, what's now called Reno Hill. They dug in, completely shaken, surrounded, and essentially pinned down.
So Reno's battalion is effectively neutralized pretty early on.
For the main part of the fight involving Custer, yes. They're besieged on the bluffs, fighting for their own survival. They can't support Custer.
Meanwhile, Custer and his 210 men are moving north along the ridges, still thinking he can strike the village.
It seems so. He likely heard the firing from Reno's fight, but pushed on, probably looking for a way down into the northern part of the encampment. He wouldn't have known the full extent of Reno's route.
But instead of finding an attack route, he runs into
the main body of warriors. They had dealt with Reno, and now they surge north. And this is where Crazy Horse executes this brilliant countermove.
What did he do?
He leads a massive charge that sweeps around Custer's northern flank, cutting off any potential escape route back the way he came. At the same time, Gall and others who'd pushed Reno back are now pressuring Custer from the south and east.
So Custer is hit from multiple directions, almost simultaneously.
Yes. He's caught in a vice. Completely surrounded on open rising ground. No good defensive cover.
And this wasn't a prolonged siege like Reno was facing on the bluffs. The native accounts describe it as being over quickly.
Incredibly fast. The consensus from both archaeological evidence and native accounts is that Custer's command was wiped out in probably under an hour. maybe even less.
An hour, 210 men.
It was a relentless, overwhelming assault, wave after wave of warriors. The soldiers' positions were overrun. There were no survivors from Custer's immediate battalion.
Annihilation.
Total annihilation on that part of the field. Later, the bodies were found scattered across the hillside, some in small groups where they'd maybe tried to make a final stand. Custer himself found among them. Last Stand Hill.
For the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors, that moment must have been incredible. A massive victory.
Immense. They had defended their families, their camp. They had fulfilled Sitting Bull's vision. The soldiers had fallen like grasshoppers. It was this huge affirmation of their power, their resistance.
A moment of fierce pride and independence, surely.
Absolutely. But it was a victory with a shadow hanging over it.
How so?
Sitting Bull reportedly understood immediately. This was too big a defeat for the U.S. government to ignore. The backlash would be severe.
And it was. The Army came back with overwhelming force.
They did. The victory at Little Bighorn, as stunning as it was, actually accelerated the end of Plains independence. Within about a year, the military pressure was relentless. Most bands were forced onto reservations.
And the Black Hills. The whole reason for the conflict.
Lost. Formally annexed by the U.S. government shortly after. The victory was militarily brilliant, but strategically, it couldn't stop the larger forces at play.
It's fascinating how the narrative shifted afterwards, though. Custer's last stand became this romanticized tragedy in the press.
Yes, initially Custer was portrayed as this heroic martyr, dying gallantly against savage hordes. That narrative served a purpose. It justified continued military action and westward expansion.
But it also deflected blame, didn't it, from potential failings by others?
Exactly. There was significant controversy around Reno and Benteen questions about whether they did enough to support Custer, accusations of cowardice, especially against Reno.
So the last stand narrative kind of protected them.
In a way, yes. By focusing on Custer's supposed heroic, isolated doom, it centered the blame on his perceived recklessness rather than a broader command failure or the actions or inactions of his subordinates. Reno faced a court of inquiry, but ultimately wasn't formally punished. The heroic Custer myth helped sanitize the whole messy affair for the military establishment.
But over time, that narrative has changed, become more complex.
Much more complex. Historians started looking closer at Custer's decisions, at the Native perspectives. Today, the interpretation is far more critical of Custer's arrogance and tactical errors, and far more respectful of the Native strategy and resistance.
And you see that at the battlefield itself now, right?
You do. The Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument has evolved. You have the white marble markers where soldiers fell, but now you also have red granite markers honoring the Native warriors who died fighting there. It's an attempt to acknowledge both sides of the story on that landscape.
And the original injustice, the taking of the Black Hills, that hasn't just faded into history either, has it?
Not at all. And this is crucial. Decades later, in 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court actually ruled on it in United States v. Sioux Nation of Indians.
What did the court say?
They ruled that the seizure of the Black Hills back in 1877 was illegal, that the government had violated the Fifth Amendment by taking the land without just compensation. They offered a significant monetary settlement.
Which the Sioux Nations have famously refused to accept, right?
Yeah.
They want the land back.
They have refused the money, yes. For many, the land itself, Pahasapa, remains sacred and non-negotiable. It brings the whole story right back to its beginning, the broken treaty, the stolen land. The legal system eventually acknowledged the original wrong, even if it couldn't undo it.
So when you boil it all down, the battle was this collision course set by political failure, the broken treaty.
Definitely. Compounded by Custer's ambition and tactical arrogance.
Which then met this incredible moment of unified Native resistance and strategic brilliance.
A perfect storm, really, leading to this stunning but ultimately fleeting victory for the tribes.
So what should you, our listeners, take away from this deep dive? Well, the Battle of the Little Bighorn is unforgettable, not just as Custer's last stand, but maybe more significantly, as this powerful, potent last stand for Native independence on the northern plains.
It was a victory that paradoxically sealed their fate, proving resistance was possible, but ensuring a response that would ultimately crush that resistance.
Yeah. And maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. How often do the biggest consequences of history lie not in the dramatic battle itself, but in those slower, quieter outcomes? The legal rulings decades later, the ongoing fight for land rights, the way memory itself gets reshaped.
Exactly. It pushes us to look beyond the battlefield smoke, doesn't it? To see the long, complex ripples of political decisions and failures and how they continue to shape the present. It's a reminder that history is never truly over.